Mr. Secretary, thank you for the time.
Sure.
House Speaker John Boehner rejected the president's plan almost as soon as he proposed it today. So how does this move us any closer to avoiding gridlock with the supercommittee?
Well, we've got to try and work through it. I mean, I think you've heard Republicans and Democrats say that we've got unsustainable deficits. We should do more to help the economy in the near term. The president's laid out some proposals for doing that. And we think they're good ideas. We think they're good economics. We think they're better for the economy and the alternatives. And we're going to try to get them done.
Why should Americans see this then as just a political statement heading into the election year?
Well, we're being guided, and the president's being guided by what do we think is the best for growth in the short term, so more Americans get back to work, and what's the fairest way, the most sensible way for us to bring down the long-term deficits, create some room for investment in things that make us stronger in the future. Now, we've laid out detailed proposals for doing those two things: help the economy right now, help strengthen growth over the long run. Now, there's some other ideas out there, and we're going to have a debate about what makes sense for the country. But I think there's broad recognition across the political spectrum that we can't just push off the deficit problem forever. It's something we've got to deal with now, and if we can deal with it sooner, it'll be better for confidence in the United States.
Well, I want to ask you about the Buffett rule. The White House is saying that it's the president's guiding principle for tax reform. Administration is also calling this plan, though, a comprehensive plan. So wouldn't that have meant offering a specific rate for the Buffett rule and spelling exactly how much it should raise?
No, I think what the president's laid out is a set of principles, objectives for tax reform: lower rates, clean up all the waste and subsidies and special preferences and loopholes in the tax code that's so expensive, help improve incentives for investing in the United States so we're more competitive long run, help reduce our long-term deficits, and make the overall system more fair. So the Buffett principle, which is a principle that says that if you make more than $1 million a year in the United States, you should pay no less as a share of your income than an average middle-class family. That's a simple, basic principle, one principle of many. And we want to try to lay the foundation for comprehensive reform that meets that test.
But it's not a piece of the proposal that would actually go toward deficit reduction significantly.
Well, again, you want to look at a set of objectives. We don't just have one objective. And those objectives are to bring down rates, clean up all the waste in the tax code so we make it more fair, help contribute to long-term deficit reduction, help improve growth incentives for investment in the United States. But overall, of course, we want to make sure that the people in the best position to bear more of the burden for solving our problems as a country, bear that burden.
Now, the plan doesn't include some of what was on the grand bargain table over the summer. So does that mean that measures like raising the Medicare eligibility age should not be part of the supercommittee's consideration?
Well, they can look at anything they choose to look at, and if I think they're right to, what they should do is to say, we'll look at everything that helps make the country better, make the country stronger over the long run. But what the president did is look at the merits of all the alternatives we face, and what he put forward was he thought the best mix of policies. They're very tough, very strong spending reforms that affect large swaths of government and the American economy. Very hard, very tough, but also some tax reform that help make the country stronger in the future.
But so even though raising the Medicare eligibility age is not part of the president's plan, it's something he would still be open to accepting?
Well, again, what he proposed today is a set of reforms to Medicare and Medicaid that are designed to make it more likely that they're around for future generations. Doesn't put too much of the burden on those on future beneficiaries, but tries to improve incentives for how people use health care. You know, one thing that's very important we all recognize is that Americans, well, let me put it this way, you want reforms that help lower the rate of growth in healthcare costs by trying to help Americans be a little smarter about how they use healthcare. So his reforms are guided by that basic principle.
I want to ask about corporate tax reform. Today, the president said the corporate tax rate needs to change, but it's not really part of this plan. So is corporate tax reform dead for this Congress?
Not at all. What he proposed are a comprehensive reform of the individual tax system and the corporate tax system. So when he said lower rates and broaden the base, improve incentives for investment, that applied to the treatment of business income, corporate income too. And we have been spending a lot of time with members of Congress and the business community trying to look at a way to design reform of the corporate tax system that, again, make this country a better place to invest, build things, create things. And we're going to look for an opportunity to try to get Congress to move on that as quickly as we can.
Higher than 50-50 chance this Congress?
You know, it's hard to tell. You know, we're in a political moment. You've seen us fighting about things we shouldn't be fighting about, like, you know, whether we meet our obligations as a country. things that were sort of unthinkable for us. But what the president's trying to do is to lay out things that would be good for growth in the near term, good for growth in the long run, that should not be inherently divisive politically.
I want to ask you about a new book. It includes an interview with the president. It depicts his economic team as virtually dysfunctional. Even Larry Summers was quoted as saying, "There's no adult in charge." So was the economic team that you're a part of just not ready to deal with the magnitude of the crisis that it inherited?
I haven't read this book, but I live the original reality. And the stories I've heard about this book bear no resemblance to that reality.
Okay, well, switching to Europe. You've been to Europe twice now in the last 10 days. What do you still need to see from the Europeans to be assured that Greece can avoid a default?
Well, the Europeans are under a lot of pressure still, and they're going through a really tremendously difficult job of trying to build a stronger union, stronger economic union, with a very strong financial firewall to help those countries that are undertaking reforms. And obviously, they have a lot of work to do. They recognize that more than anybody. They're the ones at the leading edge of that pressure. But we as a country have a huge stake in them solving this problem. And we are doing as much as we can to help them put in place a stronger package of financial measures. Of course, ultimately, it's up to them. But we have a big stake in helping them do that.
But given that, are you concerned that they're not taking your advice?
Well, I think if you watch carefully what they've done, and if you watch carefully what they're going to do going forward, I think you're going to see them draw on the lessons of our crisis, draw on the lessons of things that worked here in the United States, because they've met the test of what works and what doesn't work. And again, I think you'll see that reflected in some of the choices they make, as you've seen it reflected over the last 2 years.
And are you confident that U.S. banks at this point can ride out whatever shocks are headed our way from Europe should something like a Greek default occur?
You know, one of the great strengths of this country was when we were faced by crisis, we moved very quickly, very aggressively to strengthen our financial system, bring a lot more capital into the financial system. And so the U.S. financial system is in a much, much stronger place now to deal with any of the challenges we might face in the future, not just from Europe, than we were before the crisis.
But it could handle the shocks of a Greek default.
Yeah, I think we're in a very good position, a much better position to handle those shocks from whatever the source is, because we were so aggressive early on and making sure our banks were in a much stronger financial position.
Treasury Secretary Geithner, thank you so much for the time today.
Good to see you.
You too.